The Wasp Factory. Chapter 4, Part 4. The bomb circle, my dad's leg and his stick, his reluctance to get me a motorbike perhaps, the candles in the skull, the legions of dead mice and hamsters. They're all the fault of Agnes, my father's second wife, and my mother. I can't remember my mother because if I did, I'd hate her. As it is, I hate her name, the idea of her. It was she who let the stoves take Eric away to Belfast, away from the island, away from what he knew. They thought that my father was a bad parent because he dressed Eric in girls' clothes and let him run wild, and my mother let them take him because she didn't like children in general, and Eric in particular. She thought he was bad for her karma in some way. Probably the same dislike of children led her to desert me immediately after my birth, and also caused her only to return on that one fateful occasion when she was at least partly responsible for my little accident. All in all, I think I have good reason to hate her. I lay there in the bomb circle where I killed her other son, and I hoped that she was dead too. I went back at a slow run, glowing with energy and feeling even better than I had at the start of the run. I was already looking forward to going out in the evening, a few drinks and a chat to Jamie, my friend, and some sweaty, ear-ringing music at the Arms. I did one short sprint just to shake my head as I ran to get some of the sand out of my hair, then relaxed to a trot once more. The rocks of the bomb circle usually get me thinking, and this time was no exception, especially considering the way I'd lain down inside of them like some Christ or something, open to the sky, dreaming of death. Well, Paul went about as quickly as you can go. I was certainly humane that time. Blythe had lots of time to realize what was happening, jumping about the snake park, screaming as the frantic and enraged snake bit his stump repeatedly, and little Esmeralda must have had some inkling what was going to happen to her as she was slowly blown away. My brother Paul was 5 when I killed him. I was 8. It was over 2 years after I had subtracted Blythe with an adder that I found an opportunity to get rid of Paul. Not that I bore him any personal ill will. It was simply that I knew he couldn't stay. I knew I'd never be free of the dog until he was gone. Eric, poor well-meaning, bright, but ignorant Eric, thought I was still... Let me start over on that one. I knew I'd never be free of the dog until he was gone. Eric, poor well-meaning, bright, but ignorant Eric, thought I still wasn't, and I just couldn't tell him why I knew I was. Paul and I had gone for a walk along the sand, northwards on a calm, bright autumn day after a ferocious storm the night before that had ripped slates off the roof of the house, torn up one of the trees by the old sheep pen, and even snapped one of the cables on the suspension footbridge. Father got Eric to help him with the clearing up and the repairs while I took myself and Paul out from under their feet. I always got on well with Paul, perhaps because I knew from an early age that he was not long for this world. I tried to make his time in as pleasant as possible, and thus ended up treating him far better than most young boys treat their younger brothers. I saw that the storm had changed a lot of things as soon as we came to the river that marks the end of the island. It had swollen hugely, carving immense channels out of the sand, great surging brown trenches of water streaming by and tearing lumps from the banks continually and sweeping them away. We had to walk right down almost to the sea at its low tide limit before we could get across. We went on, me holding Paul by the hand, no malice in my heart. Paul was singing to himself and asking questions of the type children tend to, such as, why weren't the birds all blown away during the storm? And why didn't the sea fill up with water with the stream going so hard? As we walked along the sand in the quietness, stopping to look at all the interesting things which had been washed up, the beach gradually disappeared, where the sand had stretched in an unbroken line of gold towards the horizon. Now we saw more and more rock exposed the farther up the strand we looked, until the distance the dunes faced a shore of pure stone. Until in the distance the dunes faced a shore of pure stone. The storm had swept all the sand away during the night, starting just past the river and continuing farther than the places I had names for or had even seen. It was an impressive sight, and one that frightened me a little at first, just because it was such a huge change, and I was worried that it might happen to the island sometime. I remembered, however, that my father had told me of this sort of thing happening in the past, and the sands had always returned over the following few weeks and months.